Okay.
Yep.
Ready? All right, guys. Thank you for being here. First of all, so today we had the pleasure to have what I call really amazing artist. He's doing something that I relate to as an artist. I'm Latino, Mexicano, and I feel like Gil Rocha, which is going to be today's speaker, is going to talk a little bit about his practice, the way he practiced, art, sculpture, and the way he actually see himself in these artworks. So one of the special things about today's lecture, the way he's used with the artwork is basically related to what we call Rascuachismo. Rascuachismo is something that it was coined during the late 70s by Dr. Tomás Ibarra's Prasto, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, the 60s. So it's basically Rascuachismo. You're going to learn a little bit about that. So he's Gil Rocha is going to talk a little bit about Rascuachismo, and you're going to really see how it's used, and he's going to talk a little bit about the history and how he's using it in his artwork. So I have my cell phone right here. I'm going to go into the introduction. So like I said, I feel honored to have Gil Rocha. Gil Rocha is a contemporary artist born and raised in Laredo, Texas, which is a border town to Mexico. His art practice is in and out of his studio encompasses a variety of techniques, including assemblage, painting, drawing, sculpture, and installation. His work expresses the lexicon of the Mexican-American border and the many social-political issues that derive from it. Rocha earned a Master's of Fine Arts from the School of Art of Chicago, Institute of Chicago, and that was in 2006, and then in 1999 he earned his Bachelor's of Fine Arts from UTSA. So he knows a little bit the institution, he knows a little bit the town, but also he knows a lot of artists, which is some of you guys are here present, probably coming here to support. But then, Gil has been exhibiting all over the United States. He actually has a show in Galveston Art Center. I always keep forgetting that. He showed in New Mexico, but also he did some residencies in Mexico. So he's been well traveled when it comes to he being an artist, and he's gonna talk a little bit about one of his favorite dreams, being a full-time artist, and then he's gonna give you insights about what to do, probably what not to do. But there's a lot of things that he's gonna talk about, being an artist in practice, but also how to use Rascuachismo, and of course the most important stuff to see how he actually makes his pieces, and how he put into what we consider the modern times of contemporary art. Okay, so please guys, everyone welcome Gil Rocha.
Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, I'm honored, to be in your presence, and let's welcome somebody else. Let's see. Oh. Just in time. So, so again, thank you for being here. Thank you, appreciate your time and listening to this lecture. Hopefully I can have enough or plenty of information that you guys can grasp and get to apply, whether to your work, or at least give you a new point of view of what is the things that I do, how I mix found objects, assemblages. I'll give you a little very brief history of like Rasquache and where it derives from, what is that term. So I'm just going to go through the slide, but first and foremost, like one of the things to keep in mind, I guess the title that I decided for this lecture is, am I Rasquache or just core? And so some of the things that we're gonna learn after these 25 slides are a little bit about me, what we will explore, a historical timeline defining Rascuachismo, global parallels, what are the things happening between Rasquache, things in the borderlands, but also globally and how they connect, and my creative process. I'm gonna show you, I think, one of the things that I told a morning class that I went to give a lecture / workshop was that I was in your shoes, back in 98, 99, and one of the things that I always wanted to know, I was so eager to know what it was to be like an artist. What does it take? What do you do? How do you sell? All these different questions and all these different curiosities that I had. And so I plan within these 45 to an hour time that we have together that I can maybe answer some of those questions. And so these are with the intentions of the person who I wanted to get this when I was in your seat, right? Because then again, right now, I'm like the artist, but right after this, I go back to being a student of the art. And then finally, I'll show you some selected works. So again, I was born in Laredo, Texas. I'm a former public art educator. I taught for like 21 years in middle school and high school. And currently, being represented by Presa House Gallery. Here's Rigo, the curator, co-curator and founder of Presa House. Gerald Peters Contemporary Santa Fe and Kurt Hopper Gallery in Dallas. Now, this sounds and looks really fancy, but it's really hard. It's just like, oh wow, like he's represented by it's different from that, and we can get into the details of, exhibiting. Certified teacher, I'm a curator. I want to say that I'm a poet, because I'll just kind of like Dr. Dre, that he says that he's doctor. Well, I'll say that I'm a poet. And then, advocates for the arts. I'm the board president of the Laredo Center for the Arts. I grew up with the Laredo Center for the Arts, from volunteering, painting walls, doing labels, all that kind of stuff. And now, helping manage the decisions that are made for the Center for the Arts. These are some of the things that we're going to explore. There's 5 things. One is the origins of how I see. One of the things about Rascuache and the things that I do is that I ended up going back and researching of how things transform and why do I do the things that I do? How do they make sense to me? And so we'll go through that, like a timeline, the language of Rascuachismo, what exactly is Rascuache? Again, like the global parallels. This is, I think, particularly special for me and this lecture of the 3 generations, because Rascuache gets to a certain point, and I think there's something else going on. There's something happening where the work that contemporary Rascuache or Chicano artists are doing now, it's starting to shift. I don't know how to pinpoint that, but right now, for myself, I'm calling it cáscaras, right? And I'll explain why. And then finally, some reflective questions. When does resourcefulness become romanticized poverty? Where does pride and exploitation of objects begin, like purpose versus aesthetics? Is found object art an indicator for lack of resources or overconsumption? And then finally, I don't know if I can answer this one, but we'll try. So, quickly, 5 different time periods of where things derive. So between the 1940s and the 1960s, there was the Bracero movement, which was immigrants being accepted from Mexico to work in the United States legally, and sometimes illegally staying here. But the Bracero program were farm workers, were railroad workers, and so at the time, a lot of immigrants, it was hardship. It was difficult to leave their families and just to survive, to be able to provide for the family. And eventually, during the 1960s and 70s, there was the Chicano movement, the union workers, where they kind of decided that being exploited as farm workers was enough. They were gonna stand against, or up to the system. And so that's where I feel the Rascuache roots kind of grew. First, there's necessity, from making tools, finding anything that will help us survive, to here where, okay, how can we express this thing, where we're uncomfortable? So one of the most important things I feel is the Teatro Campesino, which was a theater that was used to provide information of why people or farm workers were protesting, making sense of things. And so this is where the spark of creativity comes from, necessity to creativity. And this, of course, is where the birth of Chicano art comes about, where now artists are starting to be formally trained, not just for making things to sell, but making things to express. Then in the 70s, up to like the 90s, that's where a lot of artists are now taking art as something academic, that they understand what art history is, you know, and how it can be applied. And there's this really great collective that if you don't know of, I recommend, which is ASCO from East Los Angeles. And there were a group of 4 individuals that worked together, and it was kind of like the system was against them. The White Cube, beautiful gallery and museum spaces weren't accepting them, but they didn't take that as the final say so. So they kind of rebelled, and they were like, you know, and this kind of history of showing aside from what is expected has a trajectory from like Fauvist artists to, you know, different movements where artists are not accepted in the white galleries, so they make their own spaces, and that's where they exhibit. And so that's what ASCO did. This collective showed in the streets and things like that. In the 2000s up to 2010, now the shift of just Rascuache is starting to become from regional, from like the border and the Mexican American, to an awareness of what's going on globally. What are the connections of things that are happening? And then up to the present, things are really shifting. I mean, now there's a lot of different sort of sections of where I feel like the Chicano growing to the Rasquache and growing now to, or growing into, what is it? ¿Qué fue lo que te dije de Ángel Cabrales? The Chicano futurism.
Futurism,
So
yeah.
there's like new traces. There's like also from the Chicano, also Domesticana, which was like also the introduction or finally women being accepted. And so bringing in, you know, their point of view of, for example, men are very like, you know, hammering and molding and making and building like this toughness to what art was. But then with Domesticana, it's like the more subtle, softer of like fabric using, weaving, sewing. And so then this sort of new medium comes into play. And I think now both men and women are working not just like from a female point of view or a male's point of view, but now I think there's like this quilt that is being built by a lot of the people that are working in this, you know, in contemporary art. So that's kind of like quickly of how it comes from the braceros to how it's being mentioned today. And these are 2 examples of what Rascuache is. Rascuache is a term that is not very favorable. As a matter of fact, just like Chicanos, it's not something that you would want to be called, because it has like this negativity of being less, of not being enough. And so one of the things is that early Chicano work also has this very kitsch like aspect to how things look. And so for example, here is do with what you have. And so there's this bathtub that was converted into an altar. But if that's what you had, then that's what you do. And over here, for example, with Amalia Mesa Baines, now she's transforming, you know, now she is studying what is art, what is the history of art, and incorporating and having more of an expression where it's not necessarily just dealing with religion, but it has to do more with like the introspect of, you know, how religion maybe is affecting her as a female artist. And, you know, it gets more complicated than that, but this is, you know, Domesticana explores themes of gender, sexuality, feminism within the context of domestic life. These are different examples. Giambara or Giambara. This is from like Brazil, and you're gonna see that things in common that we tend to do ourselves. Like if your glasses break, how many of you have ever used maybe tape to just fix something quickly, right? Or a piece of wire, or using a lemon as an ashtray. You know, so it's something very immediate. That's what Rascuache is. It's how to fix something quickly with whatever you have. This one is really cool. I mean, and then things, it's kind of like, just real quick, I think initially we are like that. Everything kind of derives from Rascuache. When you first start building and making something, you just do with what you have, and eventually you start elaborating, mastering the craft, mastering the technique. But at first you just find whatever, like Cande Aguilar, one of my friends, and he said like even the Wright brothers were Rascuache, like with the early models of the airplane. And I was like, wow, never thought about it, but you're right. You got also like in India, I mean, look at this is marvelous. Or turning something into something else. Now this is a sink, what it used to be a motorcycle. So there's always the aspect of making something with what you have. Sometimes it's more aesthetic than others. Sometimes it's like, who cares? I'm just gonna put some tape and some wire, and if that works, that works. But I also wanna touch base that, you know, this mentality, and something that I question is that as Mexican American, if we tend to think of fixing something, for example, a wobbly table, by putting, you know, a piece of paper or a napkin to fix the problem immediately, do we then get used to that mentality that, oh no, pues if it works right now. But if we get so used to it, do we also get used to it emotionally? Like, you know, oh, I don't know, but I'm gonna take kind of like a perspective of, let's say a male that is heartbroken and very macho, and be like, oh no, pues they left me and I'm brokenhearted, and you know, I'm gonna listen to sad music and I'm gonna drink. Like, does the drinking, you know, cure the problem? Maybe it'll help alleviate it for a little bit, but you're not fixing it. And that's kind of like some of the things that I've been looking at. It's like, if Rascuache is a form of survival, have we applied the visual and, you know, the physical to the emotional without really paying attention? Here's another in Africa. I mean, a lot of the things that we have here, like in the US, I mean, I've seen like videos of the consumerism that we have here in the US. I mean, everything is so inexpensive that, you know, sometimes it might be cheaper to just get, you know, another shirt rather than iron it or something, or go to the washer, or go to the laundromat. It's like, no, I'll just buy, you know, a pair of, you know, new underwear. Instead of spending money and washing them, I'll throw them away and buy new ones. I mean, that's a ridiculous example, but what I'm getting to is that the what we have in especially in the US, of like this consumption, eventually has a result, and the result is impactfully negative in other parts of the world, where all this fabric and all these things end up somewhere, you know, and they end up in many countries that are, you know, that take what we send, and then they manage to find alternative ways of using things that sort of reflect back, and we find something cool, and so it's a back and forth thing, but it has impacts around the world, and that's something that I think we need to be conscious of, and I think that's where also like the Rascuache philosophy, and why I feel that it's important, because it not only helps the survival, but also that we see how other countries without the economic opportunities that we have here, how they've survived. Like, for example, Cuba, where they're still, and it's unfortunately of why, but the thing is that there's still cars from like the 1950s running, you know, where here maybe we don't, like the cars from the 2000 are obliterated and we still have from 1950s still working, much simpler, being fixed. So moving on to my inspiration and research or planning, they kind of go hand in hand. Some of the things that I look at, I like reading a lot, I look at a lot of books, the music that inspires the work. I get inspired by different types of music, but specifically with the work that I do in the Rascuache, it's a lot of music that is from northern Mexico, and they're like corridos. And what corridos are like stories being told, like a folk music, and they mainly talk about like drug trafficking, and also there's always like fights in them and somebody being brokenhearted. It's like three main things, and it's kind of like country music. It's always about losing the girl, getting drunk, and going on the horse or something, right? So it's kind of like that. I enjoy taking walks and driving around town, looking at things. I'm always, even if I don't want to, I'm always working. But I mean, it's a really cool way to work because I'm actually not doing much, but I'm always looking for things. I'm always finding stuff that people will do and be like, oh, why did they do that? What does that tell me? Then I'll snap a picture. I'll take a note of that. Some of the other things, so there's a lot of personal observation, but previous movements that have a reflection of what I do is like the wabi-sabi philosophy of when something is broken, that you can find beauty in it by fixing it back. And I try to think of that, of like how we could be broken in many ways, but we have to find ways into putting ourselves back or helping our friends, so that way there's something more beautiful. That's what makes you maybe even better. I mean, very romantic of me thinking like that, but it's just me. Arte povera, which is the poor art. This was a movement in like in the 1960s in Italy, and it's a reflection of like how bad the economy was then, and the use of found objects as well. So I research through like the internet, I take notes, I write concepts, I do digital portfolio, and by digital I mean, I find things kind of like Pinterest, like, oh, I like this, and I just start getting all this info, and then I could maybe print it out, put it on the wall. I start selecting materials. Like I said, this is a never-ending process. I'm always finding trash, quote unquote, which I think they're treasures, and watching videos to learn new things that I would like to know, or at least to understand how things work. Like, let's say that I get an idea of having something being sewn. Well, maybe I'll watch some videos, take a note so that I can learn more. But even if I don't sew myself, that way I can take it to somebody that is an expert, and at least I can have that common vocabulary of getting something done. Then the execution part. This is, of course, to me, this is all fun, but this is the making of the work. Personally, even though I have, like I said, corridos something's going on, I like to put, if I'm gonna have music in the studio, something that I'm very familiar with, so that it kind of gets lost in the background. Because I think that if I have music that my mind has not listened to, that then it distracts me. I pay attention to a different beat. I pay attention to a different word that is being said. So I kind of stick to the same thing. And then, just letting go, making the work, letting the work do what it wants me to do, kind of getting away from it. I work with different pieces at the same time. And sometimes they're there for years. Sometimes I'll finish one piece in one night while another has been waiting for me. The post-production, editing videos, photos, making the artist statement really important, and uploading them to the website, social media, and then responding to, clients, curators. Okay, I wish there was more of this, right? But like curators sending like up-to-date images of what I've done. And then finally applying lately, especially to artist residencies. Okay, this is one of the works that is currently at the Chich of the Soy de Texas exhibition, which was curated by yours truly, Rigo Luna. And so this is currently there at at the Cheech. Really honored to be part of that exhibition. Thank you. So I guess now we're going into the artwork. How much time do I have?
30 minutes.
30 minutes?
20 minutes.
Okay, plenty. So one of the things is that when I'm making work, like I said, I like to let go. I don't like to illustrate a feeling. There might be already something that I want to get from the work, but I'm not like, okay, I'm going to express love, or I'm going to express how sad I feel. You know, those are not things. That kind of is within the material itself. I feel that the material, especially if it's worn out, at least to me, or it has a texture, it's the color has been already outside for a long time. All these things speak about a certain thing which I can't pinpoint. When I start working, I don't say like, oh, this is what I want to express. At least 95% of the time, no. Unless it's a project where it's something that I've illustrated before, that I know that it's gonna take a lot of steps, and that really is for a commission, that it's really something that has been pre-approved, like for a show, then maybe 5% of the time, I will kind of work towards that, which, I've given a lot of talk, like, or public works, something like that. But for the most part, I just go with the flow. And then eventually the work speaks to me afterwards, or I pay attention to it and it goes back and forth. But I like using language, both English and Spanish, but I think, some of the things are used from things that I've seen to things that I hear. For example, on this one it says, "Se vende aire," like air for sale. And that was something that I experienced when I was a kid. I went to my grandma's house and my uncle was selling an air conditioner. And he had this sign outside. But something clicked where I told my dad, it's like, why is he selling air? Like, who sells air? And I thought it was a far-fetched idea. But then one of the things is like, just like asking people many years ago that they were gonna sell them water. It's like, who sells water? Or who's gonna buy water? It's free. I mean, the air is free. At least we think it is free right now. But at some point, I mean, I've been to Vegas and they have like that special flavored air, and I was like, how much is that? So, I mean, it's just things that I don't know, have like a profound impact, even though they're simple. This other one, mi perro me mió, it's like my dog peed on me. And that's kind of like a Mexican saying of like when things are going really bad, like how bad or how much worse can they get? It's like, oh, the dog pee on me, oof, my God, like that's it, right? That's the worst of luck. This was a Coca-Cola sign, it's esto cala, like this hurts. And so overall, I made this piece just to have like this experience of when I would go to Nuevo Laredo, to my grandma's house, where the houses were kind of falling apart, things were just being put together, however, with wire and pieces of wood and patching up and this and that. But something that really stood out after when it was first exhibited, actually here in San Antonio, was that a friend told me that even though this fence was really flimsy and of course that she could break it, she said that it reminded her of her grandmother's house, and at the time that was the safest place on earth for her. So I was like, even though it's something so flimsy, it has something that reminds somebody. So I think that's the jumping point, that my work is just the jumping point from like your personal experiences. It's like just meet you at the door and then things will start coming out from there. This is another piece that I was commissioned to do for the Mexicarte Museum. And this is like a changarrito, like a little store. And the way that I imagine this store is supposed to be like the last store somebody would come across in a hidden place on the Mexican side coming to the US. And so this is where they would get the last thing before crossing illegally, right? Now, I'm not gonna get into the politics of whether, you know, the decisions of what people do or what they make, but I'm always thinking is like, there is that one last, like this piece, that's where it derived from, imagining a group of people at the final frontier about to do something that will be life-changing. But also, as a reflection, it's like, what things have I done that I felt that are necessary because I feel that they're important and that they're gonna be life-changing? For example, quitting teaching. You know, it's a comfortable life. I have a lot of, you know, economically benefits and all this and that. And I'm like, but this is, you know, I can do better. So or by better, I mean I can do more. I think I can be lecturing in schools and, you know, traveling and doing all this. And so anyways, we tend to be in situations like this. When that thing comes to you or is presented, what are the things that you're gonna be carrying? Are you gonna take, you know, things that are reminders, pictures, things for survival, water? You know, what are you gonna be carrying in that backpack? And again, not to be literally like something illegal or, you know, or life risking, but something that you know that it's gonna be life changing. It could be something like getting married at that point. What is it that you're gonna do when you're faced with those decisions? And so here in the mirror is kind of like pointing up, but the thing is that when you look down, you look at your shoes when you stand in front of this piece, and it says suerte. It's kind of like inscribed in there by cleaning the mirror. It's really dirty, so I cleaned it, and it says suerte, which means good luck. So you stand in front of this thing, and you have all these options, and when you look down, you're looking at your feet. They're the ones that are gonna take you on that journey. This piece is called Apartad Dos. So I play again with language, and this is, you know, separating like something as simple like a parking space, but I also like to think of materials of what belongs outside, what belongs inside when things are neighbors. I don't know, I kind of like put like some sort of character into things when they're divided by the kitchen window, and maybe a plant is outside versus a plant inside, or the cat that is outside versus the cat that is inside. You know, how do they relate? At some point, where do they cross? Do they fit in together? Do they get along? And so there's this border, not just literally from where I come from, but also in our everyday spaces. Can something from outside be inside, and can they mix? And if they do, what new stories can they tell us? You know, or what new places can they point us to? Yeah, and so this, I'm just taking a bunch of like different images and plants. Plants are also often used in, you know, I use plants because I think they're an indication of the health of the space. What I mean by that is that if you pass through somebody's house, and you see that the plants are lively and flowering and, you know, in pots and things like that, you know, that's a healthy kind of space that is being upkept. But when plants are dying, you know, that is kind of like indication of that it's not, you know, things are not maybe going so well. So it's a direct reflection. These are some of the other pieces that I have. Like I said, I love reading this book in particular, like Between Two Worlds. It's so impactful. It's hard to read because it has like all these stories that become then very emotional of like the braceros and, you know, Mexicans that came into the US and the hardship that they went through. And so you're reading this, and like, especially for me, kind of like thinking that that might have been something that my grandfather would have passed, or something that, you know, he might have felt. And it's, you know, it's tough to read things like that. And so I decided to do kind of like this homage, this like sacred little space where I have things that are very personal, or in this case, like we have this between two worlds. It's the world inside, the world outside. There's a cassette tape that my mother used to listen to learn English and repeat words. And so it's called Inglés sin barreras, like English without barriers. And then over here we have Los Tigres del Norte, like some corridos from my father. So within the word, there's space in, out, you know, to the sides. And these are very formal. They're kind of like, you know, still things popping out in assemblages, but also they kind of stay within this parameter comfort zone in comparison to other pieces that might extend and open spaces so that you can physically walk between them. This one, los mejores éxitos, the best hits. And again, one of the things that, I mean, I don't know if you guys believe in this, but I do. I think like, I mean, I know that it's a very new thing of like the manifestation, but I tend to like manifest a lot of things. Or I don't know if it's just that then my mind is set on looking for that, right? And I think that's what opens it. But I was thinking that I needed a pinball machine because I wanted to do something. And so I looked online, you know, I'll buy it on eBay, but oh no, like it's too expensive, the shipping, I'm not gonna get it. And then I'm just driving through the neighborhood and out of nowhere, boom, a pinball machine. And I was like, what? Like, no. So I call my brother, he has a truck. It's like, you better come over like right away, help me. And he's like, he comes over, I think in his mind, he was thinking this beautiful thing that we're gonna play. And we see it and it's all like falling. He's like, what? Like it's too heavy. And, you know, you're gonna dirty my truck and everything. But anyways, this small, and it was a little small pinball machine, but this came about it. And so then I had like this other sign of like se renta, like things for rent. And I don't know, this kind of thing came out. To me, it's like, almost like you can get cassettes like from back in the day where you would rent tapes, but in a very Rascuache way with the fans and wire, and it's just, you know, hand inscribed in there, los mejores éxitos, the best hits. And I'm just gonna show you the two latest pieces, and these are two of some of the latest pieces that I have at the Galveston Art Center. And this is called Sink, and it's just, like I said, it's a sink that is dripping. It has a little pump there. And the thing is that the pump broke, and again, I manifest things sometimes, and it's crazy, because I was like, how am I gonna control, you know, because I don't want it to be so much like of a fountain. And I was inspired by one of my dad's inventions, but the water comes out like a lot, right? But the thing broke, and so I put it back together with like the top of a Sharpie marker, and then I pasted it with silicone, and I put it back together with some strap. And because it wasn't well done, only very little pressure is being used from the pump. So it did exactly what I wanted to do initially, like just one drop at a time. And you know, if I don't tell you, you're gonna be like, oh wow, genius, but no, it's like anything but. And now I'm starting to work on these things that I call apartments, but they're kind of like just vases, or you know, these flower containers from different things of, yeah, like, you know, soap bottles and things like that. And they're just, to me, they're like these tiny apartments where people live next to each other, and they're loud, and you know, I can almost like hear like kids screaming and people fighting, and the cops at 3 in the morning, you know, for domestic violence or something like that, like all this, like, and that's how I kind of like see these, and so that's what I've been working on lately. Again, I don't try to go too deep. I try to analyze this from a distance, and I need space. remember the shoes that were in the first slide where I'm like sitting in the thing? Like now they're there. I ended up like cutting my tennis shoe after I had done the mural, and you know, the shoes weren't fitting that well anymore, so I was like, okay, time to like cut them. So I literally cut them, and that's what I used for this piece that I call apartment 8B. But these flowers are also like dying very quickly. I don't think they appreciated the piece so much. So finally, to reflect this slide or this presentation, when does resourcefulness become romanticized poverty? I know that when I grew up, pants, you know, if they were cut up, parents would put patches, or you wouldn't want to show that your pants were torn. But now it's a very hip thing. You know, it's at what point does something that comes from not having then becomes hip and cool, and you appropriate that to make it, you know, I don't know, like something really expensive. Like somebody told me that they saw, I had like pants, so I went to go with my friends to go play poker, and this is not the brand, but let's just say that I come in with these pants that I was painting in the studio. He's like, oh wow, like are those Prada? And I'm like, dude, like these are my painting pants. But he was like, it's because I just saw them in Vegas and they were like, you know, over $300. I was like, I'll sell them to you for $300. But you know, at what point does that is being taken? So the other thing is, where does pride end and exploitation of the object begin? Like purpose versus aesthetic. Does it express something? We've talked about like I said, because I look for objects and that they have a history in themselves, and then with combining them, maybe create a new story. But we also have to be careful. Well, I mean, I don't know, in art, it's hard to say, but knowing that you can make something look like something, but it's not that. You can make it look Rascuache because you found a formula, and that's something that I have to be really careful, even with my work. You know, something that is like, okay, I've done this enough, and I'm getting used to it, like the structure of like, you know, I ended up finding that within my work, and very recently, that my work was looking very, very like this. This is my expression about it, right? And I was like, why is that happening? Because the things that I was choosing were just pieces of wood that had been cut. And so eventually, as a result, that's why the works look very like this. And so on purpose, I said, no, like, let me use something else. And so I just started welding, and I started doing like the latest things of like the shoe, and, you know, adding other things so that I could get out of that routine. Because I have to be careful that I don't fall in my, you know, in a trap of repeating myself. And I don't want to get too comfortable with it. Although I think, in the words of my friend, maybe he would say, but people were already like starting to pay attention to that, and you were starting to sell it. Really sorry. And then finally, his found object identification for lack of resources or overconsumption. I don't know, you can answer that on your own. Am I Rascuache or just poor? Well, I don't know. I want to say that the difference is that Rascuache is more of a philosophy. It's more of a mindset, you know, of a survivalist. Like, I'm not gonna let anything bring me down. I'm not gonna stay here. With whatever I do, I'm gonna make the best of it. And eventually, so that you can give to the next generation, which was the three things that I told you about, like the generations. The first, maybe the parents or the grandparents suffer, and they give their lives so that their sons and daughters can have a more comfortable life. And so then our parents do a lot better, and they have it good enough so that then we can be artists, because now maybe they can help us financially. And so now I was thinking, is like, how long does it take to make a masterpiece? an artwork, a masterpiece, and I don't think, and I'm not saying as an artist, like, oh, maybe in your 20s, like, I don't know, like Michelangelo. No, no, I'm talking about culturally. How long does it take for an artist to be in that place? Maybe 3 generations until we have plenty of time to sit back, relax, think, make. Where our parents didn't have that privilege, and our grandparents much less. So we're in a very, I don't know, ideal place where we get to sit and think like this, because maybe back then there wasn't enough time. If you were gonna express yourself creatively, was to make something that you could sell. But now we make something, and I'm like, well, I know that I'm not gonna sell that, but I'm still gonna make it, right? And so maybe that's also something to consider and think about. How long does it take to make a masterpiece? And so with that, I think I'm gonna end the lecture. Maybe wanna. Do you have any questions? 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
You have any questions, please?
I'm curious to know about your space, your studio space. I was thinking about that this morning when you were at our class, we ran out. Are you very organized?
Super unorganized. Unorganized. No,
So you just have
there's
tiles?
logic and structure
Yeah,
within the space.
yeah.
But no, I wish. It's because once I start working, like this is a constant thing. Like after a certain amount of time, I have to clean up, put things completely back in place, like tools especially. And then I'm like the Tasmanian devil. Like, you know, I'm just like things start spreading very quickly, all over the place. And so, you know, that's kind of how I work. I have to see everything at once so that I can see like all my options. Like I could very well, I mean, I think I could make a box where I like, okay, all the wood goes neatly here, but that won't work.
So it could start out that way, but then you get it all out and
Yes.
it's everywhere, and then at some point you kind of clean up and start.
And
over.
come back, yeah, like the pile comes back to place, and
Yeah.
yes, exactly. But I mean, it's a big space for me, I think, but the more space you have, it's kind of like a table. You know, you have one table and you're like, oh wow, like it's too filled. Well, let's get another table, and you'll fill it out as well. And so that's my space. I have a pretty big warehouse, I mean, at least for me, which, I mean, coming from graduate studios where you have like these tiny spaces, which at the time I'm like, oh, I'm in the graduate program. Like, look at you, bachelors. Like, you know, like you have tiny spaces that you have to share, but I have my own. Well, now I have a really nice big space, but still I work literally like in this area. Like, it's a warehouse and I work here. Everything's all over the place. Anything else?
Did you get this way of putting things together from a family member or someone you knew, or?
Definitely. You know, the thing is that I came like full circle where as artists, we start learning, or at least, you know, for me it was like, I started learning like, you know, Van Gogh, and I started painting like Van Gogh. Then I knew the following semester, like, you know, some other artists, and that's what I tried. And you know, I was always trying new things as the movements went on from like art history. I was doing all that, and eventually I come to realize that art could also be as much fun as when I was a kid, of making, you know, our fortresses with my cousins, and that's how I work now. Like, I'm making these things, which I can see, like, to me, one of the, even though he's like an unofficial artist, like my dad, you know, I think we all have parents like that, or grandfathers, that their garages and their patios are just filled with stuff that they don't want to throw away because you might need it, you know. So that kind of thing of making stuff, like, to me, it's, I think I finally found something that I've always done that I never thought it was art, but now it does have. The difference is that I'm aware of how it falls into the vocabulary of art. In contrast to like, when my dad fixes something, he's like, I need to fix this table, I'll just put, you know, another leg, and just like that. But when I'm fixing, or when I'm making the work, I might be thinking, okay, you know, why is this leg, you know, maybe bigger or heavier? You know, what is it gonna bring to the piece? And sometimes, you know, I try not to think too much, like, but these are things that are there.
I have a question. So whenever you travel, right? Let's say you're here in San Antonio right now. You don't have, well, you actually have some pieces somewhere here in San Antonio right now, but.
Wow. Where are the other ones? We left them in the car?
Yeah, we left it in the car, but, well, listen, you don't know me right now. So, how difficult is for you, maestro, to work in a piece? For example, right now, we don't have your pieces, but you work based on Rascuachismo, which is resourcefulness, right? Looking for something, make it work, make it your style, and probably have that connection, kind of like a sensibility connection, that not art form that only sees if you work in a specific culture, in a specific setting. But let's say right now, somebody tells you, hey, let's work in a piece. Can you make it work? But still you need your space, you need your time, you need to be able to focus and to dedicate time to create an artwork.
No, see, that's also one of the challenges. Like recently with the art residencies, I went, so I had two, very lucky to have had two in the summer. And one was in Mérida, Yucatan. And there we didn't have a space. We didn't have like our own specific gallery space. And the tools that we had were very, very basic. I just had like a hammer, literally like a screwdriver, some wire, nails, you know, the basic 5 tools that you might find, you know, in any house. Whereas in my place, I mean, I have saws and power drills and, you know, welding things and all this. So I was like, okay, I need to take it as a challenge. Can I still make the work that I do without having everything? And so I took it as a challenge, and I think I did really well, because then it sort of reflected also that particular space, because some of the things that I wasn't noticing before is that in Mérida, Yucatan, there's a lot of patterns, like all throughout like the streets and the houses, there's a lot of influence of patterns in floors and ceilings and walls. And so there was a difference between where I'm coming from to where I was, and also that I didn't have a big space. I had this much space. But see, the thing is that I grew up working in this space. I didn't have my warehouse. I literally worked outside of, you know, my house when I was actually at UTSA, and I would go back. This was, you know, all I had. I would work at night with the mosquitoes and everything and painting, or on the kitchen table, or on the, you know, on the floor, wherever I could find space. So I was like, if I did it then, I mean, I can still do it now. You know, things shift. And as a matter of fact, I feel that the more you have, the more it freezes you, because you have so many options. When you don't have much, like all you have is a pencil, well, that's all I have. What can I do with this pencil? You can draw, you know, when we were kids, that's, you know, the fascination of like creativity is like, I remember when I was a kid and with a pencil and you don't have your toys at school, then you're like, like it goes from an airplane to a machine gun to, and it's all in your imagination. So just shifting mentality. Yeah, and see, and the other thing is that as much as I wish, like this is still up to date that I'm like, if I had this, I would do that. But we're never gonna have everything, you know, it's never gonna be ideal. And I have to, as an artist and the practice and the discipline, I have to also cut off things where sometimes when I'm gonna be in the studio, this is me, and I don't know if you guys can relate, but if I'm gonna go and work, I'm like, you know what, before I do, let me just wash the dishes. Wait, I'm getting kind of hungry. Let me go fix something. And then, well, since I already did this, might as well do this. And I make all these excuses, and I never get to the studio. It's really hard. And so I have to be really conscious of like, you know what? I have so many things. I even have to write an email. I know that I have all these things, but I don't care. I'm gonna give myself 30 minutes. And I'm gonna make one move in the studio because I know that that's all it takes, one move. So I go there and I look at the piece, and as soon as I do that, like everything just clears. And I'm like, that's it, you can't stop me then. Then I'm just there for hours, and I'm not hungry, I'm not thinking, and you know, and I mean and these guys, some of my friends can tell you, I'm posting, if you follow me on Instagram, you know, be ready for a lot of memes. I waste a lot of times, but I don't recommend that for you. Do as I say, but not as I do. It's very dangerous, just like it's so easy to get distracted by that. So the reason that I enjoy working at night a lot is because then all my friends are asleep and it's kind of boring. I'm not getting their little like smiley face. I was like, might as well do it when I'm gonna go to sleep. So my schedule is actually from working all night, and I go to sleep like at 6, 8 in the morning. So, you know, my breakfast is my dinner, and then I'll just sleep from like 8 in the morning till like 2, 3 in the afternoon. And then I'm in Laredo, and my warehouse is really hot, and so it's always best to work at night when everything's calm and quiet, no distractions. And yeah.
So with one of the central issues of the work being the possible romanticization of poverty and then the proliferation of that image within the larger cultural visual vocabulary, how do you, what are some considerations that you have as an artist when entering the market and representation and the gallery world? What are some like practical considerations that you have within your own artwork or art method?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry,
I'm saying when the artwork has that built-in question of the issue of the proliferation of poverty, when you enter the market to sell, what are some considerations that you take with you on that journey when it comes to just how you do that and how you engage with the market as a whole?
Yeah, I think like because then this is where maybe like the exploitation comes into play, right? Like from my part where I'm taking something and then showing it in this like beautiful, I know that that is something that I think about. I think the thing is that, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but one of the things that I feel that it's important is that there is a certain beauty that I see within this, the fixing and surviving and making. And so the thing is that it's been dismissed or it's just been taken for granted of a daily life. And it kind of like vanishes, and it could be that. But I think it's important. I think it's important that we take a note of that and the little details that we've done that we don't think about it at all, but that are there and that are beautiful. But then when you cross into this beautiful space, then there is that clash because you're taking something that, you know, it's worn out, it's poor, maybe of poor taste. But see, the thing is that I don't think it's a poor taste. I think Rascuache itself was coined as something of poor taste, but I think there's a beauty in it for all these things that I've talked about, the history, who handles the object. Like if I have, you know, a hammer and it's been really worn out, like, you know, how much did it take for that hammer to be worn from, you know, from where you grab it? How many nails did it do? So all these things, and I think that is the beauty, and also that I think it sort of highlights, or at least I want to think, I don't know, but where it brings like this credibility of, like I said, like of survival and beauty on this then clean space, because other than that, it gets lost in the noise of the daily life. But when you have it in a clean space, that this is what you have and this is what you get, look at it, I think that's really important, and I know, at least for me, it's important because now that they've been shown, and my father, so two things, one is good and one is bad. Now my father looks at these things and he's like, oh, like that's interesting. So he's like, now this is art. And I'm like, no, like I ruined him, you know. He does things just naturally and without thinking, but when he starts then thinking about it, it's like that gets destroyed.
Yeah.
So how do you keep that balance? And again, one of the things, sorry Juan, I'm taking a little bit longer, but one of the other things is that the white space provides a clean space to focus solely on the object, where in reality, my museum is like, or the streets, or the backyards. If we could take a walk, I think we would have just as much fun in my dad's backyard as if we would go into a museum, where I could be like, look at that, just look at that. And you'd be like, oh wow, like, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
But see what I'm saying? And so then these things, if I could just take it and then put it here, it would be different. Does that make sense?
It does.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dom has a question. Okay, let's take the last question, Dom.
My question is kind of like 3 in 1. I guess obviously, you know, at like I guess in the space you're working in like a fine arts, in the fine arts space as a fine artist.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my first question kind of goes in the realm of like, do you ever find yourself seeing yourself in like different modes of being an artist? Like, I guess like a folk artist or like a pop artist, or do you just like not like labels at all?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you just feel about labels in general in terms of like, I guess like trying to label yourself as like an artist, like this is who I am, like this is who I am as a conceptual artist working, you know, in the fine art realm or the popular art realm or whatever, what have you.
So 2 things. One is that, let's say my background is like a realist painter, like, you know, painting very realistic. But then that was kind of like the schooling, and so that now I land, or I kind of like found myself into this, but the labels themselves, what I'm getting to is that, I mean, part of being an artist is that an artist can shift, like it has all these different hats. But going to where you mentioned of like folk, and those are things that I'm also really careful, because I question myself and don't think that I'm thinking like, oh, I'm a fine artist, I'm exhibiting at this spaces. No, I'm like, okay, what difference is there between what I do and a stage prop? You know, like, you know, it has like this, a stage prop person could very easily do something maybe like this, but is it that it looks like this, or is there something behind it? You know what I mean? Something might look where something is intentional, and I think that's where the maybe that danger is. And labeling, I think that just facilitates so that other people can understand kind of that structure of where you fit in, which was also another warning that, you know, friend and mentor told me to be careful about labeling, you know, the work or fitting in within the border artist, because that's what maybe for curators, it makes it easier for them to be like, oh, we have a border show, Gil Rocha. But what happens when the border theme goes, you know, out of place? You know, when it's no longer the hip and cool thing to show. You know, then are you gonna be then pinned to that type of work and you can't do anything? And I think it's important for me to think, okay, I'm coming from here, but I know that there's connections of other parts of the world, and how is my work more than where I come from? You know, how does it reflect to other things? Can the work be more than just the border and what is that? And so it's a constant thing of like labels and really good question. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I answered your question, but.
I know that's great.
Okay.
All right, guys, we had to end this because Maestro Rocha has to do other things, but then.
No, I don't.
So the deal is, before we leave, guys, please, let's give an applause to Maestro Rocha. So Maestro Rocha is gonna stay here a little bit longer, guys. Some of you have like some questions, guys. Please, stay here a little bit longer. He's gonna probably answer some of your questions. So in the meantime, guys, you have to exit. You grab some chairs from the next room, guys. So please take it with you, guys. Let's go through the back of the door. Let's go around, and I'm gonna open the door, the studio over there, guys. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.